Congress is set to vote this week on a bipartisan agreement to suspend the debt ceiling and avert a potential government default.
Did you know that the US national debt, which recently hit a record high of $33 trillion, is just the tip of the iceberg? In fact, the total US debt is estimated to be over $500 trillion, and that's a huge problem. In this video, we'll explore the shocking truth about the US debt crisis and what it means for the future of the US and the global economy. Let's start with some history. The US debt has been growing steadily since the founding of the nation, but it accelerated dramatically in the past few decades, especially after the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic. The main drivers of this debt explosion are threefold: excessive spending, low revenues, and low interest rates. First, excessive spending. The US government spends more than it collects in taxes and other revenues, resulting in annual budget deficits that add up to the national debt. The biggest items in the federal budget are defence, healthcare, social security, and interest payments on the debt. These are the most politically sensitive and difficult to cut or reform. In addition, the US government has been spending trillions of dollars on stimulus packages and bailouts to support the economy during the COVID-19 crisis, which has added more pressure on the already strained public finances. Second, low revenues. The US government collects less in taxes and other revenues than most other developed countries as a share of GDP. This is partly due to tax cuts enacted by various administrators over the years, which have reduced the effective tax rates for corporations and individuals, especially for the wealthy. It is also partly due to tax loopholes, deductions, credits, and evasion that allow many people and businesses to pay less than their fair share of taxes. Moreover, the US tax system is complex and inefficient, which creates distortions and disincentives for economic activity and growth. Third, low interest rates. The US government has been able to borrow at very low interest rates for a long time, thanks to its status as a global reserve currency and a haven for investors. This has made it easier and cheaper for the government to finance its deficits and debt, but it has also created a false sense of security and complacency. Low interest rates have encouraged more borrowing and spending by both the public and private sectors, creating a debt bubble that could burst at any moment if interest rates rise or confidence in the US dollar declines. So far, we have only talked about the official national debt of $33 trillion, but this is only part of the story. The US government has also many off-balance sheet obligations that are not counted in the official debt figures, but that are nonetheless legally binding and morally compelling. These are called unfunded liabilities or contingency liabilities. Unfunded liabilities are promises that the government has made to its current and future citizens, such as Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, pensions of federal employees and veterans, healthcare for military personnel and their families, and other programs that provide income support for health or care to millions of Americans. Taxes or other revenues do not fully fund these promises. They depend on future borrowing or spending cuts to be fulfilled. Contingent liabilities are potential obligations that the government may have to incur in case of certain events or scenarios, such as natural disasters, wars, terrorism attacks, financial crisis, lawsuits, or environmental damages. These liabilities are not certain or quantifiable. They depend on probabilities and uncertainties. According to some estimates, the total amount of unfunded liabilities and contingent liabilities of the US government could be as high as $500 trillion or more. That's an astronomical figure that is hard to comprehend or imagine. To put it into perspective, it means that every American citizen would owe about $1.5 million to the government, or that the government would have to spend about $15 million per second for the next 10 years to pay off its debts. Of course, these estimates are based on assumptions and projections that may not materialize or may change over time, but they illustrate the magnitude and the urgency of the problem that the US is facing. The US debt crisis is not just a matter of numbers and accounting, it is a matter of morality and justice. The US debt crisis is a moral crisis because it reflects the failure of the government to live up to its obligations and responsibilities to its people and future generations. The government has made a promise that it cannot keep and has borrowed money that it cannot repay. It has violated the principles of fiscal prudence and intergenerational equality that has jeopardized the economic and social well-being of millions of Americans. The US debt crisis is also a justice crisis because it affects different groups of people in different ways. The debt burden falls disproportionately on the poor, the young and the future generations who have less voice and power in the political system and who have to will to bear the costs and consequences of the debt problem. The debt problem also widens the gap between the rich and the poor, as the wealthy benefit from tax cuts and asset inflation while the poor suffer from spending cuts and price inflation. The US debt crisis is not inevitable or irreversible. Some solutions and alternatives can address the problem and prevent a catastrophe, but they require political will, public awareness, and collective action. They require courage, honesty, and sacrifice. They require a radical change in the way that government operates and the way that people participate. There are several possible solutions and alternatives to reduce the budget deficit and slow down the growth of the debt. One of them is raising taxes, which would increase the government's revenues by taxing income, wealth, consumption, carbon, or other sources. However, this would also reduce the disposable income and purchasing power of households and businesses and face strong opposition from taxpayers and interest groups. Another solution is cutting spending, which would reduce the government's expenditures on defence, healthcare, social security, or other programs. However, this would also reduce the benefits and services that millions of Americans rely on for their income security and healthcare and face strong opposition from beneficiaries and interest groups. Reforming entitlements is also a plausible solution, which would reduce the unfunded liabilities and contingent liabilities of the government by raising the eligibility age, reducing the benefit levels, means testing the recipients, or privatising some of the programs. However, this would also affect the expectations and rights of current and future citizens who have paid into these programs and expect to receive them and face strong opposition from seniors and other groups. Restructuring debt is another possible solution, which would regenerate the terms and conditions of the government's bonds by extending the maturity dates, reducing the interest rates, or writing off some of the principal amounts. However, this would also damage the credibility and reputation of the US government, erode the confidence and trust of investors, creditors and allies, and face legal challenges and political backlash. Printing money is another possible solution, which would increase the money supply and lower interest rates by instructing the Federal Reserve to create more dollars and buy more bonds. However, this would also devalue the US dollar, undermine its role in global reserve currency, and face inflationary risks and international pressures. Finally, growing the economy is another possible solution, which would invest in infrastructure, education, research, innovation, or other areas that could boost productivity, competitiveness, and growth potential. This would increase GDP and tax revenues, which could reduce the debt to GDP ratio and make it easier to service the debt. However, this would also require upfront spending or borrowing, which could increase the budget deficit and debt in the short term and face uncertain returns and long-term effects, as economic growth depends on many factors beyond government control. As you can see, there is no easy or painless solution to the US debt crisis. Each option has its pros and cons, its benefits and costs, and winners and losers. The US debt crisis is a complex and multifaceted problem that requires a comprehensive and balanced approach. It also requires a collective and cooperative effort from all stakeholders, including the government, the public, the private sector, and the international community. The US debt crisis is not only a challenge, but also an opportunity. An opportunity to rethink and reform the way the government operates and the way that people participate. An opportunity to restore and renew the values and principles that made the US a great nation. An opportunity to create and innovate a more sustainable and inclusive economic and social system. The US debt crisis is not the end of the world, but it could be the beginning of a new one, a better one. But it depends on us, on our choices and actions, on our vision and courage, on our responsibility and accountability. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it informative and interesting. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. And don't forget to leave your comments and questions below. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed.